Jai Jhulelal ji, Satnam Sakhi, to all our viewers who are joining us across the continents and time zones, welcome to you all. Today is Children's Day. I remember getting sweets from our teachers. That was the best validation ever. But in India, we recognize and celebrate it on the 14th of November. And in the rest of the world elsewhere, it's celebrated on the 20th of November. These are international days. International days are observances and occasions to educate the public on issues of concern, to mobilize political will and resources, to address global problems, and above all, to celebrate and reinforce the achievements of humanity. Our children today have grave issues to deal with and tackle, spanning from environmental decline, global warming, education and mental health, to ending racism and discrimination. Children and young people are raising their voices on the issues that matter to their generation and calling for us adults to create a better future. This is a world that we currently live in, but also where we are seeing widespread engagement and participation from the youth in making our and their lives better. This Children's Day, it's more important than ever that the world listens to their ideas and their demands. In the words of UNICEF organization, and I quote, Children's Day is a day of action for children, by children. To honor and echo this very sentiment with a holistic and spiritual approach, we at SANSKRITI SANSKAARS have curated a very special show to delve, discuss, and learn about a new order of children. They are here to reawaken, restore, and recharge the world order. And it's about how we recognize, nurture, nourish, but most importantly of all, receive from them. To help us understand this phenomena of the divine child, we have with us today Sean Clark. Sean is the editor of the Spiritual Science Research Foundation, a leading spiritual research website. He has an MBA from the prestigious Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and has worked as a strategy analyst in dot-coms in Hong Kong and Australia. His keen desire to know more about the spiritual dimension led him to give up his career more than 15 years ago and to live permanently at the Research Center's ashram in Goa, India. He's a key member of the research team where he's been studying various spiritual phenomena and publishing it on the SSRF website, while also actively making presentations for close to 100 scientific conferences worldwide. Joining us on the panel is our very own Bhavika Mirchandani. As many of our regular viewers know, she's been a stalwart on the show and brings her very own brand of magic and inspiration. These are words from Jeremy Kent that perfectly sum Bhavika up. Let your light shine as an inspiration to humanity and be the reason someone believes in the goodness of people. She's someone who loves and cares for the community at large, fulfilling God's purpose in her life at every turn. Also, accompanying Bhavika is Tulika Sharma. Tulika is a certified hypnotherapist working in Delhi, spanning a career in media and communications followed by HR. She was called to this modality owing to a personal crisis in her life. Hypnotherapy has now become her way of returning that support to society, with clients facing numerous issues like anxiety, phobias, relationship problems, career stagnations, and some physical manifestations of emotional trauma. Might I add, Tulika has a presence that fills a room. Her personality and heart compete with each other for size, truly. But first, let's welcome our founder and hear his sagacious counsel and trademark doers for our guest speaker, our most beloved Dadu Sen.
Jai Jhulelal, Hari Om, to all our viewers on Sanskriti and Sanskar channel. Today I am going to talk about the meaning of Sanskar and the meaning of Sanskriti. Sanskar is a mental impression, objective, subjective and subconscious. As regards Sanskriti is concerned, it is what we call culture, which is the sum total of all the acquired knowledge by a special community or society and the way it expresses itself in the various aspects of life. So culture is an enveloping phenomena or a word that covers language, customs, beliefs, attitude, morality, values, music, dance, technology, arts and science, philosophies, and all spiritual and material aspects of our life. Now, a society is considered civilized or cultured depending upon its dharmic values and its what you call penchant to be innovative, creative, and ready to learn, and thereby making it progressive. So it is our desire in our team that we bring about highly qualified guests of honor, speakers, to enlighten us and to empower us with their knowledge, specialized knowledge, and keep us ticking. Now I would like to welcome our guest of honor and guest speaker, Shri Sean Clark, with a welcoming doha of Dadu. This is वृंदावन में तोते देखे बोले राधे राधे, पर कृष्ण कन्हैया को प्यारे लागे, जिसके दिल है सीधे साधे. The meaning of this doha is quite apparent. Basically, it means that focus on your heart, purify your heart in order to get the grace of the Lord. Grace in Hindi is called anugrah. So, by focusing on your heart, purifying your heart, there is a very good chance of inviting the divine in you. Now, I would like to request our Anita to continue her session of today. God bless you and see you again next time. God bless.
Thank you, Dadu. That was so pure and so wonderful. Nice to see you and nice to hear from you. Without much further ado, I'll hand over to Bhavika to start the interview.
A very, very, very warm welcome. And first of all, Jai Jhulelal, Jai Shri Krishna, Om Shanti to everyone out there watching this program. Today is Children's Day, and I am a thorough lover of children globally. And today I wish every child, lots of love and blessings to every child out there and the child within us too. So, very warm welcome to Mr. Shane Clark. So, sir, I have a question for you. Being an editor of a research foundation, what prompted you to look into the concept of the divine child? And how have you researched the topic and authenticated it? Mute.
Okay, I'll start again. First of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Welcome, Sean.
Pleasure to be sharing our research with you. So to answer the question, hello. So I used to actually live in Australia, and at certain point in time, I came back to India, and this is basically to live at the research center in Ashram in Goa, India, to basically understand about the spiritual dimension and how it affects our lives. And what I found was that it affects basically our lives ubiquitously in almost every manner. And somewhere along the way, probably this was about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, what we began to notice was that there were children being born to Sikh parents in the ashram, and they started manifesting different kind of or probably a propensity for spirituality. And Paratpar Guru, Dr. Athavale, who's our mentor and guide, he kind of coined a term for them, calling them divine children. Now, for many people out there, as you rightly asked, how do you kind of authenticate this kind of thing? Now, to be honest, there is no way of actually authenticating this through, let's say, in its entirety through modern science or modern science equipment. And the reason for this is, and I have to probably step back and share with you some kind of a basic concept out here. So let's say, for example, if you wanted to measure the length of something, you would take a foot ruler or measuring tape. If you wanted to measure the weight of something, you would take a weighing scale. If you wanted to measure the IQ of a person, you would use an IQ test. You couldn't use a foot ruler to measure IQ. So the important thing I'm trying to explain out here is that for every kind of thing that you're trying to measure, there is a unique measuring equipment or measuring scale for it. Now, when you're trying to measure something about divinity or let's say the spiritual purity of something or the spiritual level of something, the actual tool that one uses is something known as sixth sense. Now, sixth sense is, if I had to use an analogy of something like a microscope. So if you had a 10x microscope, you would be able to see these small little, probably germs, kind of blurry, kind of running around your hand or some kind of a equipment. But let's say you had a 1000x microscope, you would see far greater levels of clarity. So I guess what I'm trying to say is sixth sense, whether you have little of it or you have a lot of it, actually all of us have it to some extent, you would see greater levels of it. And which takes me to my next basic concept, which is about spiritual level. And I'll come to in a moment to explain how you can actually start to measure it using equipment that has been designed nowadays. So spiritual level, if you had to take a scale of, let's say, 1 to 100, where 100 would be the epitome of spiritual growth or spiritual evolution, which is known as God realization in some cultures, or becoming one with God. And the bottom end of the spectrum would be the spiritual level of, let's say, an inanimate object. So mankind in the current era, on average, what we have found through spiritual research, and this is through advanced sixth sense, would be at around the 20% spiritual level. When one starts to get interested in some form of getting to know the divine, it generally starts at around 30% spiritual level. Seekership starts at around generally about 40% spiritual level. And as one reaches the 70% spiritual level, that's when one is actually called a spiritual guide or a saint. And a saint of the highest level is a Paratpar Guru, who is at the 90% spiritual level. Now, as a person grows spiritually, they have greater and greater access or insight into the spiritual realm. So they don't have to actually read a book on spirituality to understand spirituality. There's an innate sense, I think Anita was also speaking about the soul. So it's actually basically soul knowledge, where you're tapping into soul knowledge and speaking about a subject on spirituality. So if I had to sum up spiritual growth or spiritual level in a small capsule, it would be that we are all made up of the five senses, the mind, the intellect, but we all have the soul within. Most of us identify with our five senses, mind and intellect, and cannot see beyond what we see in the mirror. But as one grows spiritually, one begins to transcend one's attachment to the five senses and mind and intellect, or one's own small mind and intellect, and starts tapping into the soul within, which is the universe, and has access to the universal mind and universal intellect. Now, having said that as a, what should I say, as a background to what I'm going to say about the subject, is that in the past, we only had sixth sense as a measure. And when I say sixth sense, I'm sure all of you have been to a place and you've had this kind of, or you have a gut feel where you say, no, I don't like this, or I really like this, or this has a good feeling about it, this has a bad feeling about it. What you're actually doing is nothing, with no rational reason. What you're actually doing is actually tapping into some kind of a vibration that you're feeling, and then, talking about it. But nowadays, with the advancements in, aura and energy scanners, they're able to actually tell us, about the aura or the energy or the subtle energy emanating from any person or an object. And they can tell us to some extent whether there's positivity detected or there's negativity detected. Now, mind you, while sixth sense is like the holy grail or the actual pinnacle of how you do spiritual research, these instruments are very important because they actually produce a little report, which we're all used to as per modern science, and they provide us with some kind of clarity about what it is. And the best thing is that one instrument will concur with another instrument. So let's say if you're using a polycontrast interference photography, the results would kind of endorse something like the universal aura scanner.
Right.
Right. So, what exactly separates them from gifted and talented children? Like, are there any ways to determine that, what is the difference between, somebody who's gifted and somebody who's spiritually inclined?
So these children that we're talking about, Bhavika, are basically children that I'll call him Param Pujya, Parataguru Dr. Athavale. Basically, who he identified as children who are being born from the higher spiritual realms. Now, you have to understand, we're talking about two different paradigms out here. One paradigm is, of course, let's say or one level is at a physical level. So you can have a person who's extremely physically strong, athletic, or a person who is weak. So also mentally, you can have a person who's mentally strong, and you can have a person who's mentally weak. In similar manner, intellectually strong, intellectually weak. And in the same manner, you can have someone who's spiritually stronger or have a higher spiritual level, and a person who has a lower spiritual level. Now, the person at a lower spiritual level doesn't have to be weak physically. He can be extremely tough physically, but not of a higher spiritual level, for the simple reason that he has not practiced, or rather used his spiritual muscles through some kind of regular spiritual practice. He's done physical practice, but not spiritual practice or physical exercise. So there's a clear separation between all these kind of levels, whether it's physical, psychological, intellectual, or spiritual. So that's the first important thing to understand. Now, if a person or a child has shown exceptional ability in, let's say, in music, or or a talent for athletics, or a talent for mathematics, again, it does not mean that this talented child is spiritually gifted.
Right.
Okay, so they're all separate. So a spiritually gifted child is a person who has practiced spirituality in the universal sense of the word, not the sectarian sense of the word, which is, my way or the highway kind of spirituality, but in the universal sense of the word, in accordance with universal principles. And this has happened over many lifetimes. And once you do that over many lifetimes, what's interesting about spiritual practice and spiritual level is, you see, if you're born, let's say, whenever we were born, we have to learn ABC, we have to learn 1, 2, 3, we have to learn all these kind of things to live in the world again. Okay, but when one learns something at a spiritual level or experiences something at a spiritual level, if in a previous lifetime, when they're born in this lifetime, they take off where they left off from in a previous lifetime. And that's what's the important point out here. Whatever you learn at a worldly level, you kind of have to start again. And whatever you learn at a spiritual level, you take off where you left off from in a previous lifetime. So you can actually have two children, both toddlers, maybe 2 or 3 year olds, and both of them will show markedly, even though they're from the same family, they will show markedly different traits. And the reason for this is that our personality and our spirituality is actually defined through many lifetimes. So a child can be very aggressive when they show signs of aggression, or they can show signs of spiritual propensity since they're young. And these are the kind of children that we call divine children, because as per their spiritual level, they actually come down from higher spiritual realms of the world. So to put an analogy like this, there are some people who would gravitate to some kind of places which may be dark and not so good. And there'll be some people who will gravitate towards places where, they want to help society, want to be, want to look out, or very altruistic in their outlook, or want to really work with society to make it a better place, or make Earth a better place. Two different types of people, but basically at an intrinsic level, it is dictated by how they've lived their lives over previous lifetimes. So I'd just like to share my screen with you, and I know this is probably something that many people would wonder. I'm just sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So basically what we did was we used this instrument known as the Universal Aura Scanner, where we took 8 divine children's pictures who we identified as divine children. And this was purely through sixth sense. We just look at them and we know, okay, that at a vibrational level we understand. And we took 32 average children across all various cultures, and we measured their auras using this Universal Aura Scanner. Now, this scanner was developed by actually a former nuclear scientist in India, Dr. Mannamurthy, and it's used to measure both positive and negative energy or auras from both living and non-living objects. Now, this graph that I have in front of you, the red bars that you see are the negative auras that were detected in the divine children. So everyone has some level of negativity and positivity, and especially what we found that in today's world, if you see the news, it's more bad news than good news, and it's actually the state of the times. In the past, we would never see such kind of negativity in a person, but in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen that it's really picked up. So this is the negative aura that was detected in the divine children, and here you can see the 32 other children, which is the dark gray bars, and you can see some children had a negative aura of close to 200 meters. Now, as you can see out here, 40 meters, 60 meters, you can see all the going right up to 200. Now, interestingly, when we measured the positive auras, A few of the 32 children, the average children that we measured, actually had positive auras. Okay, and that's a good thing. So that means actually 1/3 of all the children we had actually had positive auras. But you can see out here, the maximum was just around above 6, going all the way down to about 0 to 1 meters. But now hold that thought, because I'm going to overlay this graph with another graph, and that shows these are yellow bars, which is the positive aura detected in the divine children. Now, mind you, this instrument we have no control over. It behaves, it has a mind of its own. And it's been able to pick up these kind of positive auras from these children. And you can see the initial blue bar that we have has now become really small. And you have this skyscraper effect happening out here. Now, you may be very interested to know who these two children were. The one with the 821 meter and 793 meters. And these were two children that we identified at birth itself, who were born at the spiritual level of a saint. That means at the 70% spiritual level. And automatically you can see these kind of auras of 800 meters and 790 meters. And so as I said to you, this is the instrument picking it up. And all the instrument is doing now is kind of endorsing what we already knew through sixth sense. I hope that kind of
Does, yeah.
So basically, why is it that at this time that we are told we are seeing increase in the number of births and number of these children? Why at this particular time?
I think, again, I'll have to probably step back to an article that we actually wrote, and this was we published this article in the SSRF website, and this was in, I think, 2007. And basically, our research center, one of the main missions of our research center is to help spread awareness about the spiritual dimension and how it affects our lives. But I remember Anita talking a bit about in this Children's Day, and we were referring to that children nowadays, their lives are pretty much different to when we were children. And one of the reasons for this is actually we're living in very, I wouldn't say interesting times, but it would be probably more on the difficult side. And what we've realized through spiritual research is that actually the entire world is going through a kind of transition period. Just like you go from, let's say, darkness to dawn, so also we're going from a period of darkness in terms of yugs, or small yug within a yug, or an era within an era, where and we actually mentioned this in the article in 2007 that climate change would be increasingly becoming when it is not really being talked about internationally, that climate change will affect people worldwide. There will be increases in terms of war, increases in terms of adverse activities of humanity, and this is basically a sign of the times. But the good news is that there is going to be a transition period where humanity will kind of say we've had enough, and we will go to a more spiritual state. And this we foresee happening in the next few years itself. The time period is quite short, but there will be a amount of anguish that whole of humanity will go through, and as we are currently going through, before that next period will start. But for that next period to really start and to set us in the right direction, this is why children of a higher spiritual level are being born. In the past decade, we've had more and more children, and even 2 decades ago, we've had more and more children being born who are now of age adulthood. But basically, they already have a spiritual pedigree, if you can say, which will help to lead mankind or channelize mankind's thinking to a better way of life. Instead of being selfish, or instead of being, myopic in your view, you would be more expansive, rather helping others, trying to make this whole world a better world. As we would say, Ram Raja on earth, something like that.
Yeah, it's more like from Kalyug to Satyug, kind of.
So while we are in the broader, what should I say, in the broader era of Kali Yuga, we will be transitioning from a Kali Yuga within a Kali Yuga to a Satya Yuga within Kali Yuga.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so my fourth question is that so these children, are they very grounded children, or they have these innate deep sense of spirituality, or do they have to be groomed and nurtured in this aspect?
So it's interesting you asked that question, is because living in the ashram, you actually get to see them and interact with them on a day-to-day basis. And I must say, if I look back at myself at the age of, let's say, 8 or 9 or 10, I would not be speaking like them. They speak in a very elevated kind of a manner, and they talk in an elevated manner. They talk about spiritual concepts. They demystify spiritual concepts and make them sound so simple. You can have, I've seen children of 8 and 9 guiding, adults asking them questions and them answering them. But the fact you said is from birth, and the thing, as I said, you take off where you left off from in a previous lifetime. If you are spiritually, whatever your spiritual, whatever you've earned for your self spiritually, you take off where you left off from. So as I said, I mean, if you are born, let's say, at the 60% spiritual level or 70% spiritual level, you will display things or characteristics that are far beyond your years in terms of spirituality. And in fact, we had this one case where this little child who was in the bassinet would keep looking at one side, and then she would say, "Ma, ma." Huh? So the mother was very happy. The mother said, "Mama, that means me. I'm the first to get the first words out of her mouth." But actually, what that child was saying was, she was looking at a picture of deity Sri Krishna, and looking at that picture, and was calling him Mama, Mama, as in uncle in Hindi. So, like that, we've had children who've just shown. In fact, why don't I share my screen again with you? So you can see these are pictures taken of children. Just a few of the number of pictures taken, that they just automatically gravitate to things that are more spiritual. This is a boy who's actually showing tears of spiritual emotion. It is known as bhav, and spiritual emotion is that experience where a person can actually feel a divine presence. Now, you can't coerce this. These tears, you can't manufacture them. It happens by themselves, or it manifests in about 8 ways, spiritual emotion. But what happens is, out here, is that automatically tears start flowing down when you feel that intense presence of God, or your whole hand, your hair will start to stand on end, or you would have goosebumps, or you start trembling, your face going white. You can't control them. They're automatic manifestations of spiritual emotion. I want to actually share with you how they think. Now, this is a girl who's now a doctor, and I'd like to just share with you, just to show how she thought when she was a child.
I felt a sense of inner peace that I never thought that we need to ask for anything from God. So usually when people would visit temples, they would ask for something. But I never asked for anything from God, because I thought, what if God has better plans for me? And if I ask for something less, then that would be my loss. So I really never asked for anything.
So just imagine, at a very young age, not asking anything from God, but having clarity about why she doesn't want to
I
ask,
felt the sense
not ask for anything from God. This is another one.
when some difficult situations come in life, instead of thinking about why this is only happening to me, I try to focus on what is God's plan for me. I try to keep the faith that if this has happened as per God's wish, then definitely there will be something good in it for me.
So having that thought that, there's always something good in it for me, that innate sense of positivity. This is another one.
I have always felt that instead of thinking about how I am looking, I need to see the state of my mind. Is it pure or not? Or I am being caught up in reaction towards others? Because much more than external appearances, the purity of my mind is important. And I realized that when my mind is purified of defects and ego, then I will truly connect with the divine.
Now, this girl is 14 years old. How many teenagers actually think like her? And I'd like to play one more for you.
When someone praises me and my ego starts to get inflated, at that time I immediately seek forgiveness from God. I realize that I'm just an instrument of God. My ego loves praises, but I realize that praises won't take me forward in spiritual practice.
So this is that innate understanding that ego comes in the way of spiritual growth. And this is not something that she's prompted. She automatically says this by herself. So these are the kind of conversations that these children have with each other. And I remember being part of that conversation once, and I'm just remembering to myself, at that age, I was just running around thinking about wanting to be an astronaut or a fireman. So there you go.
So I would like to, first thank you. It's very, very enlightening, all this information which you're sharing with us. But I do have a question. These are very highly spiritual children, like you said. Would they, like in the earlier times, when all the people who we understood as being highly spiritual, they would kind of, step back from society, step back from worldliness, and go into some form of spiritual isolation where they could connect even bigger, even deeper. So, would this kind of group of children, these new wave spiritual children, would they also may want to kind of withdraw or seek that kind of isolation, or would they kind of get amalgamated into life as we know it?
So it's a really interesting question, Tulika, because what I have seen, and this is in my 20 years of practicing spirituality, is that every seeker is different. And some are individualistic, or rather, and how we call them is they're more vyashti oriented. That means they're more worried about their own spiritual practice. And some are samashti oriented. That means they're more worried about, or rather more concerned about, not only their own spiritual practice, but how they can help the world also. So as per their personality, or as per their prakriti, as they call it, people become different, or they how they handle the world, or whether they go into the world or retreat, depends on that person's specific personality. But what I would like to say is that once you reached a certain spiritual level, the journey forward becomes more and more easy, because the hard yards are actually about being able to extract yourself from just saying, this is the world and I want it, and I want something, I want Maya, or I want worldly success or worldly progress. The ability to come to that stage where you extract yourself from that and you say, no, I want to go down this path, I want to evolve spiritually, is a big milestone in a seeker's life. But what actually happens is that once one goes beyond that milestone and one actually reaches the level of saint, now whether one has an outgoing personality or an inward-looking personality where you're just concerned about your own spiritual development, as you go beyond certain spiritual levels, the amount of spiritual energy that you generate actually starts to shift the balance of spirituality in the world. So think of it something like a lighthouse where you have this
Yeah.
on a pitch black night, and you kind of give direction to all the seafarers. That's
Yeah.
how a saint becomes. Just their very presence on it. See, it's like the sun. When the sun rises and the sun sets, or when the sun rises, it doesn't tell everyone, "Hey, wake up, wake up!" I've risen. Birds start chirping. This one start doing this. Or the flowers open up. It doesn't say that. So in that very same way, when there is a certain threshold of the number of saints that are there in the highly spiritually evolved, automatically things start to get
Yeah.
pushed down a
Yeah.
certain path.
Yeah, that's again very, very interesting. So I mean, think of it like these are children who are part of our society, like they're growing up among us. But it's very curious for me, how would their parents be? You know, would there be something special about their parents? Are there some characteristics that kind of step up, or stand out? How would we know? Would they also be kind of spiritually inclined?
Yeah, I'd like to start answering that question actually by a small anecdote. So we came across some spiritually inclined children who we felt, my wife and I felt that they were spiritually inclined, or they were divine children and I remember then thinking, but then they haven't really got the right kind of environment. Their parents are not really doing much spiritual practice. How would they grow spiritually? And I happened to mention this to Paratpur Guru Dr. Athavale. And what he said was something that was very interesting. He says that these children are God's children. Of course, we are all God's children. But in terms of their ability, he says that God will take care of them and make sure that they get the right path going forward and the right opportunities. So having said that, what we have seen though is most of the children who are more evolved, that means like being born at the 60% spiritual level or 65% spiritual level, they're all born to seeker families. And they're being able to be nurtured from the get-go, basically, from the very start. And, you know, it is difficult to unlearn what we've learned by modern science, where you have to go and get a job, you have to go and get what should I say, start a family, and you go through the normal hoops of everyday what is normal in today's world. But let's say if you are a person who's like, let's say, Saint Tukaram being born, it would be an absolute waste to go and learn something like physics and biology and math when you are already at such a high level where you're set to be the beacon of the world, or Sant Jnaneshwar, and you are actually going down this path of unlearning what you're trying to learn spiritually.
Yeah.
Right,
So it all depends. What we've seen, that the higher spiritual level children are all born to seeker families, and I guess
Okay.
that's God's way of putting them down the right path.
So, would it be possible, maybe even desirable, to seek, to actually ask for a divine child, like to attract a divine child into the womb? Like, would it even be encouraged by the ego? How does that, how does that present itself in such a situation?
So you mentioned the word ego out there, and yes, people may think it's egotistical. God give me a divine child. But when it comes to things where the intention is very important. If you feel that really that you want a divine child because I want to progress spiritually and I want that person to also help, and I will be developing a divine child, all for the betterment of spirituality, then that does not become ego. Because what ego is, or rather progress in spirituality, is actually reduction of the ego. So that's by definition what spiritual progress is about. And now that you mentioned the womb, I'd just like to share with you a slide. So we did an experiment, and this is an instrument known as the PIP, or the polycontrast interference photography. And what it does is it produces colors around you, and each color denotes either positivity or negativity. That's as per the instrument and how the instrument is calibrated. Now, this lady out here, she, of course, she's pregnant and she has a divine child in her womb. And what we asked her to do was first take a baseline image of her before chanting. And here is after she chanted. And as you can see, there's a change in the colors. And basically, change in the colors means change in the vibrations. And here she's chanting, but also using nyas. And you can see out here, when we put the positive colors and the negative colors and their proportion. So before chanting, it was 68 to 32, where 68 was positive and 32 was the negativity in the environment around her. After she started chanting, it went up to 70, 30. And when she started doing nyas, 74, 36. Now, what's interesting is that the child in her womb was also a divine child. So the ability for a divine child to actually be able to imbibe positivity is also much greater. And I'd like to share one more interesting thing with you, is that we actually had these three divine children, and we asked them to chant for 1 hour. And what's really interesting about divine children is when they chant, they really make it count. So as you can see, after 1 hour, the negative vibrations on average reduced by 86%, and the positive vibrations on average increased by 87%. So I guess what I'm trying to share with you out here is that these divine children have the ability to actually pull positive energy towards them. So when they are in the womb, very often mothers would say that their interest in spiritual practice actually goes up. Their attachment to worldly things actually goes down, and they become more spiritually minded. Does that make sense, Tulika?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, Anita,
No, please carry on, Sean.
It's actually good to hope or wish for a spiritual child, but the best way to do it for any parent is to create that kind of a space or an environment where God feels that, this couple needs a divine child.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? You've had so much to share, Sean, and you've, given us so much to chew on. But the one question that Bhavika had asked earlier, right at the start, was, who are these children? And you've told us about children in the ashram. Why are we telling our viewers this? Are there children out there? What are we looking for? What are we trying to enlighten our viewers with? I mean, what's the sole aim and game of this? Are they just in an ashram? How do we interact with them? How are they going to impact our lives? Where are we going with this, by and large?
Okay, so the divine children phenomenon is just a phenomenon, and we want to share it with the world that this phenomenon is currently unfolding and taking place. So just as we, let's say, Mount Vesuvius is erupting is a phenomenon, and it is newsworthy, or the glacial ice caps in the Antarctica are falling down. That's
Right.
newsworthy. So just like that, in terms of spiritual terms, this is a very newsworthy item. So we would like to share with people. But I think I think the underlying thing that we are trying to do out here is explain to the world that just because these children are divine, it doesn't mean that any other child cannot strive in this one lifetime itself to reach the higher levels of spirituality. Because finally, the purpose of our lives is not to become the best husband or the best wife or the best accountant or the best project manager. The purpose of our lives, as per the universal sense of the word, is twofold. And one is to complete the destiny we are born with, and that's basically the karmic account we're born with, and that can be either good or bad. Most of the days nowadays, the karma that people are born with is more negative, and that's why there's more sadness in the world than happiness. So that's one reason we are born, to overcome our karma. And the second reason we are born is to give us an opportunity to grow spiritually, because the earth plane of existence is the plane of existence that we can actually grow the fastest in bodily form. So these are the two main purposes of life. Now these children have actually come, and there's much that we can learn from them, because they've already got many lifetimes. Yeah, exactly. Lifetimes of spiritual practice and an innate fountain of wisdom to be able to direct the world once they become adults at a later stage.
And to increase the vibrations as they go along.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So a few of us know about the indigo, the rainbow, and the crystal children that are up there. Would you go out on a limb and say that they're different in any way? Or are we talking about pretty much the same that goes across? Because there is the phenomena that was, in the 1970s, that they said that there are these special children who are going to be born into the world, and then started labeling them with these labels, for lack of a better word. Again, using the same barometer as aging auras. They were the indigo children, who were highly vibrational. Then you've got the rainbow ones who've got all the colors of the rainbow. So are the children at your ashram deemed to be any different, or are we talking about pretty much the same thing?
Short answer to that is no.
Okay.
The reason I'm saying that is that rainbow children, indigo children, was a word that was coined for children that were exceptionally gifted or uniquely talented, or showed or displayed something that was different to what other children were. And I think they were called indigo because there was this bluish kind of aura that was seen around.
Blue aura. Yes.
That's correct. The important criteria which defines divine children is their spiritual level, and that they should have actually come from minimum the subtle region of heaven. Now, most of us think that when we die, we all go to heaven, but that's actually not true. There's only really about 2% of the people on this planet that when we die, that we will go to the subtle regions of heaven, upper heaven, and beyond. And the regions beyond are known as Maharlok, Janalok, Tapalok, and Satyalok. So there are actually about 3 or 4 regions above the region or positive region of heaven. The vast majority of us, because of a lack of spirituality and excess of worldly focus, they will actually go to a place called the netherworld, but in Sanskrit it was known as Bhuvalok. So this is the place where most people actually come from. And the indigo children, as I said to you, exceptionally talented children, let's say in any field, does not have to be spiritually talented. It doesn't mean that they can't be, because you'll often find that the children that we have in the ashram who have come from the region of heaven, they are also exceptionally talented. That means they can pick up languages, they are very dynamic in their personality. But as you go higher and higher up, Maharlok, Janalok, and Tapalok, you'll find that these kind of children that are being born are far more steady, more spiritual, and they're far more insightful in their spiritual being. So indigo children, and I'm not saying that they aren't, if any of them actually did come from these higher subtle regions of the universe, we would deem them as divine children. Otherwise, they would just be talented or exceptionally, what should I say, children with exceptional abilities.
Yeah, yeah. That's a fair deal to say, because at the end of the day, their parents would probably say that they are spiritually inclined. They have been doing a lot to bring this case forward. There's so much out there. Are these children just the ones that we're talking about at the ashram, or have you actually encountered children elsewhere, other
We've
areas of
encountered,
the world other than India?
that is correct, other areas of the world, but predominantly what we have been exposed to are children who are from Sikha families around the world, because people have been reading our articles, they've actually been writing in, and we've
Right.
actually been responding to them saying that, yes, it is a divine child. Uh, I think I guess it's important to understand that these children are children who display innate amounts of spirituality. Now, and I don't want to get this wrong, but by saying this, but it's important to understand that just because one thinks one is spiritual doesn't mean that one is spiritual. Okay.
Interesting.
Generally, what happens is that, as Parampujya says, there are many people out there who call themselves saints, but they're not saints. There are actually hardly 2,000 saints in the world, 2 or 3,000 saints. But if you see, there are a plethora of people who call themselves saints in India or even overseas, spiritual guides. But actually, from a spiritual point of view, you see, when one starts becoming spiritual is generally after the 40% spiritual level. Now, let's say a person who's at 30% spiritual level, a 40% person at 40% spiritual level would be, speaking lots of words of wisdom or speaking at a much higher level, because there's a 10% difference between the two in terms of their spiritual thinking. But that doesn't mean that that person is a spiritual guide. A spiritual guide is only that person who can be called a spiritual guide is when they cross the level of 70%. Now, even seekers, and I'm saying this having lived in an ashram and having been exposed to various types of spiritual practices, whether it's path of meditation, path of devotion, or path of knowledge. It becomes very, very important that a seeker has a spiritual guide in their life. Now, and the reason I say this is because, let's say, for example, you're going to a conference of cardiologists, because everything is tangible about there and your papers are peer reviewed by other cardiologists, you know where you stand. But when it comes to spirituality, because everything is actually beyond the five senses, mind and intellect, you can't really put a finger on it. The only facet to actually be able to tell you whether you're going in a good direction is when you have advanced sixth sense and a saint tells you it. So, and only when a saint is guiding you, generally you are on the right path. Otherwise, the sad part about trying to progress spiritually is sometimes by yourself, is sometimes you don't know what you're exposing. Exactly. Yeah. You can't get misguided.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Sean, it was so wonderful having you on board. Honestly, a hugely enlightening session. Lot to learn, lot to take in, but we do have to say goodbye. We are running out of time. We have our viewership that we want to thank for being with us this evening. Definitely the two lovely ladies on the team as well. And just a quick one, please hit subscribe, please hit like, come back, have a chat with us. Let us know what we can do differently, how we can bring in areas that you all would like spoken about. Dadu just spoke to us about how many different areas we actually would like to highlight. So please, Darshako, we thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing you again. Jai Jhulelal ji. God bless you all. Look after yourself. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.